Okay, today I want to talk about embarrassment, cringe, and being cool versus being happy. And let me say one thing right off the bat. I am not and have never been cool. No one has ever caught me being cool. That's not to say that I was like, I'm not gonna claim I was like a total nerd, total dork, but I was never cool, and that was hard for me when I was younger, especially like in high school. I definitely wanted to be cool, and I wasn't. But after many decades of wanting to be cool, hoping I would never embarrass myself, something's eventually shifted. And now it kind of breaks my heart a bit when I see a lot of the younger generation caught in the very same trap that I'm familiar with. And it's funny because I get a lot of questions on my YouTube channel. I get questions from viewers like, how do I start a YouTube channel? Start getting interior design clients, start my own business, stop being a people pleaser, get okay with not doing what my parents want. How do I learn to love spending time alone? Meet new people in a new city, put myself out there for dating. And the poetic answer to every single one of these questions is getting comfortable with the risk of embarrassment. So I want to talk about it today because it's very possible that your fear of embarrassment, your fear of being cringe, as the children say, is keeping you from living a life that's really fulfilling to you. Let's talk. All right. So, after years of trying to never embarrass myself, being really caught up in having like very wide approval from my peers, I realized there were a lot of things I was missing out on. These are a couple things that you're probably gonna miss out on if you are dead set on eliminating any risk of ever embarrassing yourself. You're gonna have a hard time pivoting careers or landing a new job. I spent 8 years very publicly pursuing a career as an actor, and eventually that career made me miserable, but the thing that kept me in the career was this fear of embarrassment to admit that I was quitting. It was humiliating, it felt very public, it felt horrible to look like a failure, but eventually I was like, oh, am I just going to give the rest of my life to a career that I hate now, that is making me miserable, just so like I will never be embarrassed? The trade-off there is huge. Trading the rest of your life so that some people might not have a thought that you embarrassed yourself. Think about the trade-off. You're also gonna have a really hard time falling in love. Everything about love and dating is steeped in embarrassment. Asking someone on a date, putting yourself on a Hinge profile, going in for a kiss, telling someone your feelings, like, it's all mortifying. In order to find love, you have to die 100 deaths in your dignity. If you ever want to start a new business, you're gonna have a really hard time avoiding embarrassment. If you ever want to promote online, advertise, if you ever want to stand behind your work before anybody else has stood behind it, like, it's humiliating at times. You're gonna have a really hard time doing anything creative or anything risky. Think about trying to do stand-up for the first time, trying to do comedy. When I started YouTube, I've said this a million times on my channel, starting a YouTube channel is about the most humiliating thing you can do. Anybody you like to watch on YouTube was first really embarrassing when they put out their first video. I'm sure plenty of people made fun of me. There's probably people who still do, and they don't have to live my life. Only I'm the one who has to live in it. You're gonna have a really hard time discovering your design preferences, your fashion preferences. Like, looking at the way teenagers and the youth dress, I'm gonna say it's hard to look at a lot of the time. I was hard to look at a lot of the time. I'm still hard to look at a lot of the time. And it's a rite of passage. You have to experiment and like maybe look away you don't love later when you're looking back on photos. That's the trade-off for ever embodying something that's unique. You don't get to just like guess at a style preference the first time and nail it. If you're trying to be anything unique or original, it doesn't work that way. If you ever want to learn a new skill or try something new or even like refine your own moral compass, it takes experimenting. It actually takes even like making mistakes and thinking, I don't want to do that thing again. Same goes for making a new friend. There's rejection everywhere, humiliation everywhere. And if you're determined to never be embarrassed, you're gonna miss out on a lot of fulfillment. When I was talking to Justin about this video topic, he aptly pointed out that most of the things I just listed are considered cringe unless you succeed. walking up to a stranger in a bar to talk them up, posting your first YouTube video, promoting your small business online. All of these are considered cringe unless you succeed. It's a lot about our relationship and your personal relationship to failure. Failure is scary, but it's also just a given part of innovating, being original, learning to live in alignment with yourself. So it's really important to start noting what you categorize as a failure, what you categorize as embarrassing, because there's a Buddhist saying that goes something like, your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own unguarded thoughts. Your feelings about embarrassment, your feelings about what's cringe and what's failure and what's humiliating are going to harm you and limit your life and limit what kind of fulfillment you seek out for yourself so much more than anyone's opinion of whether you're embarrassing or not will harm you. Your own thoughts and judgments is the real threat that can limit what kind of fulfillment you can bring into your life. First of all, we're obsessed with cringe. Google Trends shows that searches for the word cringe skyrocketed basically since 2012. There's cringe TikTok, entire cringe Reddit forums. You even see cringe used in like traditional news media. And cringe itself usually ends up referring to some combination of embarrassment and disgust. Not just embarrassment, but also disgust. I wanted to look up some examples of what people consider cringe. I went to Reddit for this because it is the source of all cringe. Some examples of cringe: when girls or guys pout while taking selfies, when a guy excessively praises / flatters you in your face in order to be liked, people trying to make funny faces, people doing weird dances to make people laugh. There's also a million other ways to embarrass yourself on the daily, as I'm well aware, but all of these examples have one thing in common: striving. They all capture a moment of a human striving. And there's like nothing uglier to us than to be seen striving for something. Striving for acceptance, striving for laughs, striving for likability, striving to be found attractive. Cringe is really just a word when we catch someone striving for something, really wanting something, and maybe going about it in like a less cool, chill way than we'd like. But the thing at the core of each of these examples that we're striving for are really human things: wanting to be liked, wanting to be appreciated, wanting to make people laugh, wanting to catch your crush's eye. Some people are just better at hiding their wanting and hiding their striving than others. It doesn't mean you're a freak, it just means you haven't concealed it as effectively as people would like. I think about cringe and striving a lot, especially in our relationship to beauty. I feel like I could do a whole video just on that. Almost every single person wants to be seen as attractive in some way, and we glorify the attractive people in our world every day. But there's nothing uglier to us than somebody trying really hard to be attractive. We all want to be attractive. We all want to be liked. We all want to be embraced by our peers. But to be seen working really hard for it is cringe.
There's nothing we hate more than visible signs of trying, despite it being something we all do. There's a recent video by Mina Lay where she discusses how we end up relating to celebrities and influencers, why we worship some and mock others. It's a phenomenal video that you should absolutely watch, but in particular, I could not help but notice some keywords that came up over and over.
I feel like Austin Butler has activated many people's distaste for tryhards. Most people just like the idea of the private celebrity because they feel this person is not trying to make people like them. It seems like they're overtly trying not to succeed, of how openly blasé they were with the press.
Mina goes on to point out that perhaps being labeled cringe is sometimes the price some pay on the path to making amazing art and winning Oscars. Not bad.
And the very notion of cringe implies an idea that we're all so different. I could never be that thing. That thing's different from me. I'm radically different from you. Instead of all of us as people who simultaneously want things, try for things, yearn for acceptance, and can sometimes be caught striving. So I want to point out first that if you're really like haunted by the idea of ever embarrassing yourself or being seen as cringe, all it really is like a very human, very universal experience of striving for something, wanting something that you maybe don't yet have. So first and foremost, you're gonna do yourself a lot of favors to take that stigma off the table. There's not something weird about you. Speaking of embarrassing, I'm about to talk to you about my underwear. Today's video is being sponsored by Skims, which I can't shut up about. I already screamed about it on my podcast months ago, long before they were ever a sponsor. I'm wearing a Skims bra Right now, not because I'm filming this, but just by coincidence, because that is the only bra I ever wear, but I'm not even here to talk to you about my bra. I'm here to talk to you about, let me tell you about my feelings about underwear. Historically, I've always kept like 60 pairs of underwear at any time, which is a sickness, and let me explain why. So there's underwear I'll work out in, there's underwear I'll like, my comfy underwear that I'll wear during the day. Then there were certain underwears I could only wear if I was in a tight outfit and I didn't want to have a panty line, and then there was other underwear if I was on my period, and I feel like I had to have a million different pairs. And then, and with Skims, it's like I don't need 100 different pairs. This is from their Fits Everybody collection. It's a high-waisted, cheeky underwear. Not only is it like cute and makes my fashion choices work, but it is the underwear I wanna wear when I just wanna be comfortable. And I think the fact that most underwear always feels uncomfortable, if you want it to be cute, if you want it to match your outfit, that really makes me angry. It feels like an injustice. It actually, like, I'm not even joking, it feels ridiculous. Like, I really resent spending every single day as a woman in uncomfortable underwear. And then my friend just gave me 2 Skims bralettes, and that's how I ended up trying them. And then I was like, done, game over. It's the only thing I'll wear now. It is the softest, look at me, it is the softest underwear I've ever felt. And let me talk to you about stretch for a moment, okay? And I've realized actually what the stretch means is that it is never, ever uncomfortable. It is never uncomfortable. If I have a bloated day, when I have my period week, when I'm having like an icky feeling day, no matter the outfit it's under, I never feel uncomfortable. So I hope you get to try it so you understand what I'm talking about. You can check out the Fits Everybody collection at skims.com/Caroline. If you really wanna be a sweetheart to me, then after you check out, it's gonna ask you where you heard about Skims. Tell them it was me, please, for the love of God. Or don't, and just get your underwear and understand why I'm sitting here yelling about it. They've got sizes extra, extra small to 4X. You can click the link in the description of this video to check out the Fits Everybody collection. I pray to God that you do, because you're gonna be happy about it, and then you're gonna like me for it, and that is good for our relationship. Back to the video. I'll tell you what, I think about embarrassment a lot, because behind embarrassment is a desire to be like protected and safe, to be accepted by our peers, a desire for likability. And my entire livelihood is based on my likability. So I think about embarrassment a lot, and I'm not immune to it. I still get scared by it. I've been brought to tears by the threat of it. But at the end of the day, the truth is, I've learned that handcuffing yourself too tightly to the trophy of likability is a prison. Nancy Collier wrote some of my favorite books on this topic, but she has a great quote about what she refers to as the likability cage. Belonging is a primal human need. Belonging to the herd means we won't get left behind, left unprotected. But here's where it gets tricky. We learn that the best way to belong is to make ourselves pleasing, to be what other people want us to be. Likability then becomes our driving force and the operating system running below everything we do. And yet this drive and pressure to be likable also becomes our cage. We start managing and controlling our behavior, adjusting our wants or needs, and adapting our personality in an effort to be pleasing, which then just becomes who we think we are. The likability cage she talks about might be the one keeping you from pursuing a career your parents don't approve of, or dating somebody your friends don't approve of, putting yourself out there with your new business, your new endeavor, your new dream, your ambition, have a different lifestyle than all your peers. It really is a cage. Likability isn't the worst thing in the world. Like, obviously, if you don't care at all what anyone else thinks ever, if you don't consider anyone else, then you're no longer functioning in a society, then you're living, that gets into like sociopath territory, but there is a balance. There's also a way where you can really harm yourself. If you wanna read more about that, this is the book she wrote, The Emotionally Exhausted Woman. It's, I don't know, I reference it all the time because it kind of blew my mind. But basically, I'm not going to fully poo-poo likability. I have built a career off of it. It's important to me. But if you're not careful, you're gonna start losing yourself, and you're going to really limit the amount of fulfillment you can have in your life. The thing that makes you cringe is gonna bear some insight into a feeling you have about yourself or how you want to be perceived. For example, hear me out. I used to work as a nanny years ago, and I nannied this one family where there were like 3 boys, a kindergartner, first grader, and like a young high school boy. I was watching all the boys for a weekend, and the first grader had a big slumber party with all his first grade friends. And the kindergartner wanted to be included, so he's hanging out with the first graders, trying to be a big boy, blah, blah, blah. At some point during the sleepover, the kindergartner wet his pants, he had an accident, and all the first graders were like mocking him, right? This is like first grader cringe, first grader embarrassment, the most embarrassing thing you could do. He wet his pants, they were kind of cruel to him, and by comparison, the oldest brother, who was like, you know, maybe junior high or something, swooped in and of course was very loving to the younger brother who had peed his pants, and that's not really surprising. It would be really weird for an older kid or like an adult to also mock a child who peed his pants, right? And the reason for that has a lot to do with beliefs you hold about yourself. When an older person sees a kindergartner who's peed their pants, we don't say that's cringe. That would be a crazy thing to say. But it's not just because we're like older and wiser and nicer. That's not necessarily what happens with people. It's because the act of peeing your pants is no longer a threat to the average older person. To that first grade brother who was having the sleepover, it was so important to him to distance himself. He was very near this age of bedwetting. All the first graders really needed to distance themselves from the threat of ever being seen peeing their pants. That was such a threat to them, such a threat to their identity, such a threat to the thing they vowed no longer to be. Whereas with an older kid or with me babysitting, this act doesn't threaten the way I think about myself. I have distance from it. And because it no longer threatens something about the way I think about myself, about the way I want to perceived, I can actually see that act with compassion. Like the older brother could just see that act with compassion and see the human, this little kindergartner who just wanted to hang at the older kid's sleepover and maybe didn't hang quite as well as he wanted to. A lot of the time we have space for human compassion, but we lose that space for compassion when something on some level threatens what we'd like to believe about ourselves, or a belief we hold about the world, or like how we'd like to be perceived. I just loved that little moment. I thought it captured like these 3 generations and the relationship to identity and how people perceive us. If you want to learn a lot about people, be a nanny. Okay, it got really cold in here, so I have a sweater on. Yes, I've had an outfit change. Cringe. Okay, but you might be wondering, can't cringe sometimes be good? One might use the word cringe when watching old sitcoms that have weird fat shaming jokes in them. You might cringe when you see someone saying something really ignorant, really putting their foot in their mouth. Or even just like day to day, watching someone act really inconsiderately in public, like affecting other people in an inconsiderate way, might give you cringe. So I think there is something like, there's a value to embarrassment. There's a value to noting mistakes, noting missteps, and wanting to change. So self-awareness is important. Being willing to look at your mistakes is important. And to me, that is different than some of the more mainstream ways that cringe is used today. Because at the root of cringe is a foundation of shame. And shame is one of the most dangerous, most toxic poisons that you can pump through a human being. You gotta be careful with shame. Shame is a very powerful poison. It is shame that is also at the root of a lot of anxiety, violence, abuse, narcissism, cruelty. Almost all toxic behavior is actually rooted in shame. Brene Brown says, shame erodes the very part of us that believes we're capable of change. It's one thing to clock your mistakes, to clock your missteps and own up to them, and it is another to revile yourself or others as if there is no possibility for evolution or education. It really breaks my heart a bit to see young people so afraid of being embarrassed or afraid of cringe, especially young women. It breaks my heart. I can see the younger version of me in them. The version of me that didn't like herself, just wanted to be accepted, just wanted to know that she wasn't going to be left behind or alone. And it never made me very happy. And that strident avoidance of embarrassment, that commitment to likability, that commitment to being embraced by others as priority over embracing myself, You know, it never made me happy. But cringe is a part of all of us. We all have those things that make us recoil, fill us with secondhand embarrassment. But the thing about secondhand embarrassment is that it isn't really secondhand. The root of it is usually first person, something we reject in ourselves, something we'd be terrified to be associated with. So it's pretty human to feel cringe, just as it's human to feel disgust sometimes, but I think it can be really helpful to pause in those moments when you yourself feel cringe at someone else or at like a future idea of yourself and ask, what's at the root of it? What is the thing that I've wrapped shame around so tightly? And how else is it showing up in my life? Maybe in things I choose to do, choose not to do, how I treat others, how I treat myself. There's this kind of binary thinking that I often fall into. I talked about this on the podcast, of putting myself and other people into like one of two categories. A category I can approve of, or a category of people I can't approve of.
This idea that we're all pretty drawn to of categorizing people as like, that's good people, that's bad people. That's good people, that's bad people. There's this insane binary. I even think of myself that way.
We so badly want to group people into like, you're good and we can like you, and you're not good and we can't like you. And that's like very rarely how it works.
I catch myself thinking this way all the time, and I'm pretty egregious at doing it about myself. But this kind of thinking misses the nuance and complexity of pretty much every human person. And when you end up thinking that way about yourself, it ends up being a really hard way to live. Personally, I owe every single good thing in my life to cringe. My job, my friendships, my personality. I'm gonna say it's a good thing. Maybe I'm going out on a limb here. My boyfriend, my artistic endeavors, my small business, my podcast, all of it I owe to cringe. So I don't know about you, but I'm gonna go out and try to do something cringy out there today, because that will mean it's something new, it's something different. I'm taking a risk and I'm trying to be alive before this short life ends and I'm dead under a rock. That's not the most uplifting thing I could end on. Here's something more uplifting. Gertrude Stein said, "You look ridiculous if you dance. You look ridiculous if you don't. So you might as well dance."
All right.